Good evening from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. You are looking at the White House, and I am standing on Black Lives Matter Plaza. Those three stars that you see on this plaza are the stars of the Washington, D.C. city government. Mayor Muriel Bowser sanctioned this Black Lives Matter Plaza directly across from the White House. And where do we go from here in realizing the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where all God's children, black, white, brown, yellow, Protestants, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, everybody can come together to have that seat at the table. So as I stated, I am standing on Black Lives Matter Plaza, and it is directly across from St. John's Episcopal Church. That is where the president held up a Bible after moving peaceful protesters out of the way through the use of the National Guard. And as a result of that, he may have awakened a sleeping giant, because people have been protesting in this very spot now for 10 days. And I'm walking through the crowd here to show you the tone and tenor and atmosphere. It is an atmosphere of people coming together to say enough is enough. It is an atmosphere of people coming together to let their voices be heard, that they want racial justice, not for some, but for all, which is why so many people have indicated and stated very vociferously and with vigor that Black Lives Matter. And those are my opening observations.
All right.
So I can see your signs here, Breonna, and we should not forget Breonna Taylor, because the murderer is on paid leave on a beach. Say her name. And you're saying enough is enough. Ladies, tell me what your purpose is here today, and how these marches have impacted you in terms of bringing our nation together.
Well, for me, I'm actually from Louisville, Kentucky. That's my hometown. Even though I do not live there anymore, that's still my heart. And to hear about the injustice for Breonna Taylor that is happening currently, and to hear that her murderers are still not even been charged or been held accountable, they're not even, Louisville is just really just displacing the voices of blacks in the community. And this means so much to me simply because I'm a black woman. And unfortunately, what police brutality equates to is black women in healthcare. And the fact that she was in healthcare, she was, Breonna Taylor is who I'm referring to. She was an EMT, 27 years old, at home sleep after working 2 shifts for COVID-19. She's a shero. And for her to be gunned down and murdered in her home, and her murders are just walking free. Come on now, this whole country needs to be, just the whole criminal system, the police system needs to be restructured or defunded. It's so sad for the cops that are good cops, that may be chasing a real lifelong dream of being on a good side of justice and a good side of the system to help, and they're overshadowed by these cops that are literally murdering us, black people, in the streets. Literally murdering us. And it's sad that it had to take something as heinous as what that officer did to George Floyd for the world to listen, when this stuff has been happening more and more and more and more prevalent in the black community. This is something that we have been dealing with. So it's really good that white people and other races are coming here to join with us, because that is what we need. We need the allies. We need people that care about humans, period, who have compassion, period. Where is that? Where is this hate rooted from? And I really feel like the people who have the hate in their hearts really need to look in the mirror and see what that hate is about. If this is supposed to be an American value, then American values need to be reevaluated, because this is absolutely bananas that black people have to live in fear. We can't walk in peace. We can't sleep in peace. We can't be black in peace. What can we do in peace? And then they want peaceful protests. No justice, no peace. Period. Breonna Taylor, say her name. Breonna Taylor, say her name. We need justice for her.
I hear you.
You know, but just having all the different races just coming together for a cause. You know, we're all tired. You know, we're living history. The stuff that we read in history books that we thought we never had to endure, like we are living it. Like my kids, my grandkids, they're gonna have to, like they're gonna know, like their grandma experience this. So I'm out here for our future. I'm out here for us. Enough is enough.
It's been pretty happy. A lot of hope. You know what I mean? Because at least for most black people out here, it means white people are listening. And it's kind of what we all wanted. We've been out here for a minute. We've been out here for years. You know, black people have been talking about this for years, but it seems the fact that white people are finally listening, it's sad, but we need white people in order for the civil rights movement to move forward.
Well, I hear you. We need all God's children to take that seat at the table of brotherhood, right?
You're right. And at the closest time, out of all the times that we can actually make real change. You know what I mean? So I feel good. I'm happy to be out here.
In the world.
I'm just hoping that at this point we'll have change. I came down, I'm so moved by this. I'm so disturbed. I'm so sad. But I'm hopeful. I'm somewhat hopeful at this point that there actually will be change. And I came down to represent.
Well, I'm glad that you did, and representation is something we all need. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about having a seat at the table of brotherhood. It's time, isn't it?
It's so time. It's past time.
Back here at Black Lives Plaza in Washington, D.C. And you can hear that people are saying a chant to the President of the United States.
Vote him out! Vote him out! Vote him out!
Tell me about your purpose in being out here today.
I'm out here because as a black woman I always knew, and I knew I would have black children and a black son, and I have a black nephew, and then he's only 5, and I'm like, if I can't do it for anyone else or even for myself, I have to do it for my nephew and for my future children. I'm about to get emotional. He's so innocent, and he can be himself and doesn't maybe understand that eventually one day he will be seen as a threat. All the stereotypes or purposeful negative things that have been projected onto black men, he'll be seen as that. Mm-hmm. And I'm dreading the day, I'm scared for the day he realizes that. And so I'm out here for him, I'm out here for my future children and hopefully future sons, for myself, for my father, my brother, and even for black women as well. We are killed also and a part of this system. So I'm out here for me, but definitely for my nephew. Because when I saw the video of George, I saw my nephew. And when my nephew was running the other day, and I imagined him as Ahmaud. And so I broke down, and I said, if I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to at least come and be in this moment and participate in these demonstrations and these protests. It's the least I could do.
Your sign says it all, it ain't over, and you're here on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. What's your message to the world?
My message is there's been a lot of activity in the past week and a half, but the American dream, the American ideals that all of this is based on haven't been achieved. And I've come out for the last 8 days with a different sign that says, when does the American dream begin? I came out with this sign today. I painted it this morning because I wanted to remind people that it still hasn't begun, and we still have a lot of work to do, and I don't want people to relax and go back to their old ways. We need to keep this momentum going and change the way that America works at its core.
Talk to you about your sign, which states no justice, and you're talking about Black Lives Matter, justice matters, equality matters for all matters. And after the TV cameras and all the protesting and rallies is done, how do we inspire and effectuate change moving forward?
We just can't let it die, okay? We have to change our anger into votes, because you can't, the system is broken, and you can't change the system until you change the people in charge of the system. And that's the real problem right now. So we've seen these things happen before, and people get all upset and energized, and we have a couple weeks of protest, which is great. It's good. It's cathartic. But too often in the past, it hasn't lasted.
What are you hoping for?
Well, I'm hoping that people show up in droves in November and vote out Donald Trump and anybody else who thinks the same way that he does, and we get people in power who start looking out for the whole country, not just parts of the country.
As you may know, what we've been seeing unfold on the news in this nation and all over the world has been truly disheartening, and our country is in a moment of absolute despair, particularly for the black race. And so, my husband was led for us to just come out. In addition to just protesting and marching, we need to also release messages of hope. We need to remind people that Jesus Christ is still the answer. He's still seated on his throne, and that whatever God has told you to be, whatever God has spoken to you, that you can definitely do that. Despite whatever vicious system has tried to cripple us for so many years, despite whatever vicious system has tried to limit us, has tried to define us, has tried to put boundaries around preventing us from being who God has called us to be.
We can protest, we can go and so much things can be done, to seek for justice, but without Christ, we operate in vain. So we just wanted to just show DC that, hey, in the midst of everything, we can pray as well. We can worship. And it is through our prayer, I believe, change can take place. Maybe our protests might do much, but with our prayer, all things are possible.
The gentleman I want to introduce you now is a friend. His Bernard Kinsey. He's the president and founder of KBK Enterprises Incorporated. He's based in Los Angeles, a management consulting firm with extensive experience and success. He provides advice and counsel to senior level executives. And because of that, and because of his astute business acumen, and just his perspective on life, which is to whom much is given, much is required, Bernard Kinsey has worked with the governments of South Africa, Germany, the UK, and France, and was appointed honorary consul general by the US State Department and the Central African Republic. And then in his role in Los Angeles, he was helping to LA rebuild, the rebuilding efforts after the 1992 civil unrest stemming from Rodney King. And he was responsible for generating more than $380 million investments from the private sector for inner city Los Angeles. There's so much to Bernard Kinsey that it would take a lot longer to just introduce him, but I want to bring him in now because Bernard Kinsey, welcome to the program, first of all. Your experience is so extensive, and I haven't even talked about the corporate experience, but you came to Los Angeles, as you were telling me, just after, about 18 months after the Watts riots. So you're familiar with the anger and the frustration that so many Black Americans have been feeling for years because of the outrageous abuse of power that is often inflicted upon Black Americans.
Well, first of all, Kelly, it's so nice to reconnect. I was just delighted when you reached out to me to speak to, what's going on in LA. And I guess I want to start with this. 18 months after Shirley and I got married and graduated from Florida A&M, moved to Los Angeles, had our first place on Crenshaw, right in the heart of the Black community, our first house in Inglewood. So we know this city, 53 years worth. And having the perspective of working, I had 19 service stations in South Central Los Angeles in 1967. There are not many people can say that they have that kind of understanding from a business. And what was unique about that, 16 of the 19 Black service station dealers were Black. And you cannot find 16 Black service station dealers in Los Angeles County. Let's not talking about South Central Los Angeles. So I've always believed that, you know, if you control the jobs, you control your destiny. And we can, you know, a lot of what's happened in LA and in West Palm Beach and all the Black communities, we gave up our job with integration. What we should have had was desegregation. We didn't need integration, because integration means that we get melted away. And this notion that America is a melting pot is baloney. I mean, we don't need a melting pot. What we need is a salad bowl where everybody will have an opportunity to be able to demonstrate their cultural value. And you can then pick and choose those values that meet your particular need. I love avocado. Shirley does not like avocado. So guess what? You know, if you melt it, then nobody eats that, you know, that's allergic to avocado. So that's the kind of example. But the reality is that we've come a long ways in LA. The difference in the LA Police Department in 1965, we had hundreds of millions of dollars in 1965 money. We had 43 people killed, mostly by police officers. They would not have been shooting rubber bullets. It would have been a serious, I mean, it would have been a conflagration. I mean, it was going to be all up, all in. And what the thing that our mayor, Garcetti, and our new police chief, Michael Moore, I think we need to give them credit. They did two things. They acted professionally and they had restraint. There are only 5 people that got hurt in this LA uprising here the last few days, and they were all police officers. That's very different from 1965. So that's the first thing I want to say. What we have to do also, as much as we have to do, we got to acknowledge when we have made progress. Okay, and I hear on TV even this morning that people say nothing has changed. Well, that's just not true. Mm-hmm. If you go to South Los Angeles after the 92 riots, we have 2,000 buildings burned. You hear what I just said? $2 billion in 1992 money. And you cannot find where the riot is. But I can take you to Watts and I can show you where the riot was, because nothing happened in Watts in 1965. So the big change from 65 to 92, and since 92, we have put in 33 supermarkets in South Los Angeles. During the Watts riots, they only had 5, and they were all burned. So if you were here in April of 92, May 1st, you know, this spirit, what you had to do was leave your community to buy gas, to get pharmacy, to get diapers, to get groceries. That didn't happen this time. So I think what we have to do is to say, look, that's progress. Let's put a pin in it. And then let's talk about what do we need to do to go forward. You know, Khalil, our son Khalil, and my wife Shirley, we've been, for the last almost 15 years, we've developed the Kinsey Collection. We've been to 31 cities around the world. We've had over 15 million people see the Kinsey Collection. And what it's talking about is the African-American story of achievement and accomplishment. And I think that's one of the things that's missing in this conversation. How we got basically wiped out of the conversation to a large degree in America.
We'll be back with more Bernard Kinsey after this.
And we have a saying that we start all of our conversation: your skin speaks before you do. So just sit on that for a second. When you say your skin speaks before you do, that's all you need to know about America, because America only works on color. And when I say it only works on color, it means it's racial profiling. And I'm just amazed when I see people talking about they don't racially profile, because nobody, all these police departments, we don't racially profile. But we had 20 million traffic stops. Over 80% of them were Black. How, I mean, are we that poor drivers? You know, in other words, what it says is driving while white means you can literally speed and do anything you want to do, because you're never going to get a ticket. Because Black people are 6 to 8 times more likely to get stopped in any American city than whites. So when you see the hostility, the anger, the frustration of Black people on the street, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the 20 million stops of people being disrespected, treated rudely, and sometimes brutalized, arrested, given tickets to go to jail that they cannot get out of. They lose their job, and the next thing you know, their life has changed all because of a ticket. And we're not saying that Black people should speed or not fix their tail light, but at some point, America's got to give us at least a nod, like we give white people. We don't give every white person that has a traffic ticket a ticket. We give them a warning. Say, hey, next time, slow down. Get it. Get your light fixed. But what we do is we put them on the ground, we put them in handcuffs, we search the car, and we put them through hell. And I think that is this latent kind of anger that we all have as black people, particularly Black men. So all of these are the underlying issues that I think promulgate this issue in America, where we have not been able to go forward.
And to your point, you're echoing exactly the same sentiments that New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has expressed quite a bit over the past week, stating that there is injustice within the criminal justice system. But then there's also the issue of social justice as well. And so we have to change these, the way we train police officers. And we have to make sure that the selection process is actually getting the right kind of person who has the right temperament to be a police officer, where he or she is not expressing some sort of inherent implicit bias.
Well, you're going to have implicit bias in this country. One of the things, I'm going to be working with Michael Moore here in LA soon, but I've also worked with all the police chiefs over the last 20 years, also the sheriff and the Inglewood Police Department. And the thing I tell them is stop denying that there's no racial profile. Everybody, particularly Black folks, it's like you waking up in the morning and don't know you got a purple shirt on. You follow me? It's crazy. I mean, we do recognize color. And when you recognize color in this country, there are certain images that come up with Black males. And that's the problem we got. But if you don't recognize that you even have it, you're never going to be able to do an overlay to be able to do that correctly. So, I mean, the three P's, we have a thing called the three P's: prejudice, power, and privilege. Prejudice is phenotype. That means skin color. If you can identify me, you can make decisions. Power is the ability to control and to enforce the prejudice. And the third is privilege. And privilege is that part of America that's called entitlement. That's the Amy Coopers of the world, that everybody enjoys that are white. And I tell Black people all the time, if you don't get involved politically, which means voting, you follow me, from the dog catcher all the way to the president, we're never going to change this thing, because you cannot have accountability if you sit at home and talk about, I'm not going to vote, or my candidate didn't win, so I'm going to let somebody else, take that job. So we have a lot of responsibility too. But the scab has been taken off again. I think it's time for more constructive dialogue. And we really have a lot of work to do in this country. The first of it is really electing a new president, so that we can have someone from the top speaking to the issues that allow the governors and mayors of these cities to be able to implement. Because right now we have contrapuntal kinds of information coming out of the White House, which gets in the way of the very issues that governors are trying to do in Michigan or Washington, and Minnesota even. I mean, you got enough problems in Minnesota to having the president talking about how you're leading or not leading. So it's a lot of, but to say we have made a lot of progress, we got a lot more progress, to go. And it's really incumbent for all of us to engage with each other.
And Bernard, you have put together over the course of years one of the finest collections of African American history. And you did it in large part to remind people and to awaken people to the amazing accomplishments and contributions that our community has provided for 400 years, and even going back beyond the 400 years, what we did as kings and queens in Africa, and what we've done here in the United States through slavery, beyond Jim Crow, and to now. Why is that so important that we understand the power that we have so that we can empower our youth and even our older people to realize that we have given much, and as a result of that, we deserve to be treated equal and must continue to stand in pride and not in derision and violence and tear up our neighborhoods?
Well, our son Khalil has a great saying, about that. He says, if you don't respect me and I respect you, we can never have an equal relationship. And that's what's wrong with America right now. America does not respect Black people. But and Black people don't respect Black people because we don't know what we've done as a people. So the Kinsey collection has really, and we started this because we didn't believe we were doing enough to bring Khalil into the knowledge of African American history and culture. Okay, so that's how I started. But if you take a document from 1595, which is our earliest document in the Kinsey collection, there's an African American girl in St. Augustine, Florida, being baptized in 1595. So if you think about that, then we also have a 1598 marriage certificate of a couple, Isabel and Antonio, being married in St. Augustine, Black folks, in 1598. So all of a sudden, it blows up everything you know about the African American story in America, because we didn't come here just as enslaved people. You follow me? Right. We came here with a large degree of freedom. We practiced religion. We got married. We had lives in St. Augustine, Florida, Shirley's hometown. So if you go from there, and let me give you a little piece of history. The the Continental Congress passed a law in 1797 that essentially gave South equality to the North, so that they wouldn't secede. Now, they ended up doing it in 1865 anyway. But in 1797, they said, well, look, if you all stay, we will create a thing called the Electoral College, which will give you more equality in terms of voting rights for president. Okay? So guess what happened? There have been 2 presidents elected in this country that didn't win the popular vote, George Bush and Donald Trump. And that came out of slavery. So my contention is simply this, that everything that happens in America, everything comes out of the slavery crucible. And if you know your history, you just dial it in. So for someone to say that they're not dealing with race, they're dealing with race in everything we do, because these policies are all built around it. And what we have to do is dismantle this. And they talk about race neutral. It's hard to be race neutral when people can identify you so easily, and that identification is in their DNA about how they feel about you, which is negative. So what we say with the Kinsey family is that we give you information to hopefully change how you think about yourself, first of all, Black folks, and then white folks. But the idea really is, you just can't sit on this thing. And all of us have a responsibility to take whatever our distinctive competence is and plow that field. I say that, and whatever you're good at, let's do it. But let's do it as a community that's working together toward bettering, the African American population in this country. But you start with your neighborhood. You start with your block. You start with your community. You make sure your schools work. You make sure the police department. That's how my dad in 1941 sued the Palm Beach County School Board. So Black kids could go to school for 9 months a year. Before that, you could only go to school for 6 months a year. Can you imagine a Black kid in 1940s? I mean, he's competing for a job. White people get 9 months of school and he gets 6 months, because the other 6 months he's picking tomatoes or beans or whatever the crop is. Those kind of disadvantages are built into this system. And to a large degree, you look at what's happening with the pandemic, where Black kids here in LA, almost 22% of them didn't have internet. You follow me? Didn't have iPads. How in the heck are we these kids are gonna be a full year behind? So these kind of inequities, they go through the system, because the system, we have a saying in Black Xerox: if you solve the Black problem in Xerox, you solve the white problem. You follow me? And the same thing here. If you solve the poorest of us, you'll get the richest of us. What we do in America, we only solve the rich people. We focus on the people at the top. And they, to a large degree, are selfish, and that never comes down. This trickle-down economics is just that. It's trickle down. And you can't float my boat, from that far away.
Right.
So what we have to do is continue to push at this thing.
And Bernard, as you look across the nation and you see so many cities, rural cities, smaller cities, large cities, including the nation's capital, erupting into violence over the death of George Floyd, does it take you back to that era of Rodney King and the aftermath of that, when you saw people protesting and rioting in Los Angeles, and you had to help repair the breach then and heal the wounds? How do you see us going forward in this current time, where so many people are outraged and expressing their anger? Where do we go from here?
Well, the saying, your skin speaks before you do. And as a Black man, you're guilty until proven innocent. Mm-hmm. So let's put those together. If you can racially profile someone and you assume the assumption of guilt is what every Black male particularly is dealt with in any contact with the police. In other words, they don't look at you with, you can have a PhD or no D, and it's the same kind of treatment. And white people don't have to go through that kind of indignity. Chris Rock has a saying that he's rich and white people don't want to trade with him. And it's true, because white people know that they have privilege. Take Amy Cooper, this lady in New York with the dog in Central Park. This white woman weaponized the notion of entitlement and whiteness, because she knew that she could push the button with the police, that they would react to a Black woman, to a white woman being assaulted by a Black man. And guess what? Today is the anniversary of the Tulsa riots.
Yeah.
1921. It was called the Black Wall Street. Yep. In Greenwood, Tulsa, where thousands of businesses and Black people were burned out. Why? Because of a white woman saying that a Black man touched her. You follow me? Yeah. So this is pretty, so when you have the historical lens on this is also critical, because white men are still dealing with this whole notion. You follow me? There's some kind of way we're going to hurt their women. Okay? Yeah. So that's what's operating here. But to kind of go back to your initial question about, first of all, you need constructive dialogue. You can't, I heard someone on TV say, well, we don't want to talk to the police chief. Well, why wouldn't you want to talk to the police chief? Michael Moore, I think, is a good guy. He's trying to do a good job. And if you don't have input in that, how is he going to be able to direct 9,000 police officers? You know what I mean? So the first thing we have to do is to open up the big we and be willing to talk and exchange and develop some kind of dialogue, and then hopefully a relationship where you can problem solve. And that's what we did in LA. What we decided to do, we lost 47 service stations one night in LA, which meant you couldn't buy gas in South Los Angeles for almost a year, okay? And what we went back to is to Shell and Arco and to Chevron. They did not want to come back into South Los Angeles because they said, hey, we've done. Mm-hmm. And we got them to come back. They came back with over 60 service stations. We went to Vaughn's and Ralph's and Albertson and Smart and Fowler. And we said, look, you got a market of almost 2 million people that don't have grocery stores. You know what I mean? Right. You can't do this just throwing rocks over the transit. You got to talk to people. They need to understand that this is not a one-way street on their side or on our side. Because without it, we're never going to have the kind of society we want. Because at the end of the day, Black people are the ones that end up being hurt in this thing. They really are. I mean, we're the ones that always pay the big price, for, these indiscretions. I have a saying that it's better to be rich and guilty than poor and innocent. Because in reality, in America, Black people don't get a fair trial. And the big problem with the policing in this country, that police are basically have immunity to prosecution. Juries don't want to convict them. Prosecutors that don't want to prosecute them. And the Supreme Court, 1967, in a Mississippi case with civil rights workers, basically said, we're going to give you limited immunity, which meant, and since then it's been codified to a point that no police officer really can hardly be convicted. And that's, until you change that, people are going to see the kind of egregious behavior in 18,000 police departments around America that make tens of millions of stops a day, mostly on Black people. Do you get the size of this issue?
Yep, I get the point. It's
so the big city police like LA that I think have made a huge progress, and New York, are part of this process. But if you don't understand this, you're just kidding yourself. This is not a turn on a switch kind of deal.
Welcome back to the program. So joining me now is George and Tondra Gregory, Journey for Life. That's what they're all about, and they're relationship coaches as well as chaplains in the NFL for the team, the Los Angeles Chargers. And guys, we've seen a lot go on this past weekend. There were massive protests, as you know, all over the world, most of them peaceful. And I was reminded in some ways about the Good Samaritan, how so many people are now beginning to see that we have to be each other's keeper and not our killers. And so I've seen it from all sectors of life: police, Blacks, whites, Native Americans, people around the world, just trying to come together. Not only justice for George Floyd, but justice in terms of rooting out racial injustice so that we have racial equality and acceptance for everyone. And to that end, what do you say to people about the Good Samaritan rule and how we apply that to our families and teach it in our homes so that we can teach it everywhere we go?
Yeah, well, I think it's ironic that the name of our organization is called Journey for Life. And I think that's what we experience on a day-to-day basis, whether we're out in the marketplace or we're with families. We're all on our journey. And there's some that are marginalized. There's some that are tattered and torn. And that doesn't have to be African Americans or minority groups. That could be a hurting spouse. It could be a child that's going through something. And until we understand what the Good Samaritan did, the Good Samaritan didn't do like the Levite or the priest, which basically represents somewhat of the religious community. He didn't step on the other side of the street and walk by. The Good Samaritan stepped in the way of the hurt, the pain. And that's what we have to do as husbands and as spouses and just as human beings. We've got to learn to do, to step in the way of, and to help take care of, to lift, to ask those questions. How could I be there for you? I love the Good Samaritan, because he said, listen, I'll take you to the end, and whatever this money doesn't cover, I'll come back and cover the rest. And I feel like being a family really takes in consideration that when you are down, we are going to help you up.
Yes. I always like to say love is an action word, right? Love in action is demonstrated. And then as Christians, Jesus demonstrated his love for us. He came down from a privileged place. He was in heaven, right? Because he heard the, oppression of his people. And he came down to demonstrate that love and make sacrifices. So if we are going to love like Christ, we will be people who hear the hurting, hear oppression, and want to go make sacrifices to see that there is an answer for these injustices. And that's love in action. I think Jesus was, they have that image of him, the lion and the lamb, right? Like, yes, he is the lamb, but then when people are hurting and there's injustice, we do see him as that lion who's coming to the rescue of others.
Great point.
At some point, when we get to a level that our skin is not associated with being a problem, but being really a nice, beautiful thing to appreciate. And we have to keep working towards that. Thank you so much. We look for you on Wednesday as we continue our focus on strengthening the family, #FamilyStrong. George and Tondra Gregory, NFL chaplains to the Los Angeles Chargers, and Journey for Life. Keep on keeping on with the good things you're doing.
Thank you.
We're back with more after this. Welcome back, and now for my final word. For those who gathered here on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on Saturday during this massive protest throughout Washington, D.C., as we've seen all over the world, there was a treatise to the people given, and it stated, take a deep breath and then take action. The action that they're calling for is to spread the message that we must have a seat at the table of brotherhood in order to find the common good in each and every one of us. Hopefully by watching tonight's show, you've been righted, ignited, and united to stop spreading fear and hatred and racism, but to spread justice, knowledge, love, freedom, and peace.
Everyone's invited. We're all united on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, my sisters and brothers, get on board on the love train. Woo-hoo! Yeah. It's all right. Just give it time. Keep on marching on. Keep on being strong.